There's a specific reason why your life has been repeating the same patterns for years. You were born with access to the fifth dimension, but you were programmed to operate only in the third. Toxic person, the relationship that always ends the same way, the illness that appears out of nowhere. They're all mirrors showing what you hide within yourself. Vedic texts, the Kabbalah, and the Gnostic Gospels, which were suppressed at Nag Hammadi, all describe this technology of consciousness that initiatory orders have used for centuries. At the same time, you were taught that you're a victim of circumstances. Goddard was marginalized for revealing that beyond being able to use imagination and feeling to create reality, there exists a deeper awakening where you discover that you are the creative consciousness itself, experiencing itself as human. Each person in your experience is literally yourself who has forgotten who you really are, projected outward. Educational system was architected to block this perception, but the programming is failing. Strange physical symptoms, the impossible synchronicities, and the prophetic dreams, your body is recalibrating to process frequencies that have always been available. You've always created your reality. The only change now is being able to do it consciously. The person you see in the mirror every morning is living in multiple dimensions simultaneously, but has been programmed to perceive only a microscopic fraction of that experience. Each human interaction that occurs throughout the day is not an encounter with another separate being. It's an encounter with yourself projected into the three-dimensional field of physical reality. This is neither allegory nor speculation. It's the direct observation of how consciousness structures and experiences reality, a fact that has remained deliberately obscured. At the same time, the majority of humanity was kept in a state of functional amnesia. What is occurring at this exact historical moment is unprecedented. Humanity is going through a collective dimensional expansion of consciousness, a process that has already been underway for decades, but which now accelerates exponentially. Signs of this transition appear everywhere. The accelerated collapse of social structures that seemed unshakable, the dissolution of relationships that no longer resonate with new frequencies, the intensification of synchronicities that defy logical explanations, and above all, the growing feeling that something fundamental about the nature of reality has been deliberately hidden. There exists specific knowledge about how consciousness creates reality that has circulated for centuries in extremely restricted circles. Initiatory orders, secret societies, and esoteric groups all kept fragments of this understanding, using it to shape events while the masses remain trapped in the illusion of being victims of circumstances. Neville Goddard, one of the few who dared to publicly expose these principles in the 1950s and 1960s, paid the price of academic and religious ostracism. His teachings about the law, the conscious use of imagination to create reality, and about the promise, the awakening to our true divine nature, were systematically marginalized and classified as delusional mysticism. The global educational system, since its conception, has been structured to keep people operating exclusively in three-dimensional consciousness. Newtonian physics, linear cause and effect, and separation between observer and observed, all these concepts were hammered into minds for generations, creating a perceptual prison so efficient that its occupants actively defend their cages. Meanwhile, those who understand the deeper principles of reality consciously use focused imagination and sustained feeling to collapse quantum probabilities into concrete events, manifesting results that seem miraculous to those who operate only in three-dimensional logic. The HeartMath Institute has documented that the heart's electromagnetic field is 60 times larger than that of the brain and can be detected meters away from the body. When a person maintains coherent emotional states, this field literally organizes matter around it, influencing events in ways that classical physics cannot explain. But you don't learn this in school. You learn that results depend on hard work, physical effort, and competition. The programming is so deep that even when you experience spontaneous manifestations, that job that appeared out of nowhere, the impossible encounter that changed your life, The solution that appeared in a dream, you attribute it to coincidence or luck. The fifth dimension is not a place where we will go after some future cosmic event. It's a state of consciousness already accessible, a frequency of perception where you experientially understand that everyone in your reality is an aspect of yourself projected onto the three-dimensional mirror of the physical world. Each person who appears in your experience, from the intimate partner to the stranger on the street, is a materialization of your own assumptions, beliefs, and emotional states. This doesn't deny their own consciousness, but reveals that the version of them that you experience corresponds precisely to what you assume about them, consciously or unconsciously. This knowledge is emerging now because it can no longer be contained. The acceleration of global events, the collapse of official narratives, and the exposure of systemic manipulations, all of this catalyzes a mass awakening that will make control structures based on ignorance obsolete. Understanding these principles is no longer an esoteric luxury. It's a necessity for psychological survival in a world where old certainties dissolve daily. The Jewish Kabbalah, codified in the Zohar 800 years ago but transmitted orally for millennia before that, maps 10 Sephirot, emanations of divine consciousness that structure all of reality in multiple simultaneous dimensions. Each Sephirot represents not just an aspect of creation, but a complete state of consciousness, accessible through specific techniques of meditation and visualization. The Kabbalists navigated between Malkuth, the physical realm, and Kether, the crown of pure consciousness, not through spatial displacement, but by altering the frequency of their perception, a technology of consciousness that anticipated by centuries the modern understanding of superposed quantum states. Simultaneously, the Egyptian-Greek Corpus Hermeticum established the principle, as above, so below, not as a poetic analogy, but as a literal description of how fractal patterns repeat through different dimensional scales of reality. Original mystical Christianity, before the distortions of the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE, taught something radically different from what became religious dogma. The kingdom of heaven is within you was not a metaphor about morality. It was technical instruction about accessing expanded states of consciousness. The Gnostic Gospels, deliberately excluded from the official canon and discovered at Nag Hammadi only in 1945, reveal that Jesus taught about multiple dimensions of existence, about the illusory nature of physical reality, and about how thought and emotion create material experience. The Gospel of Thomas records, "When you make the two one, when you make the inside like the outside, then you will enter the kingdom." This is a precise description of the collapse of subject-object duality that characterizes expanded states of consciousness. The quantum revolution of the 20th century scientifically validated what mystics had always known. The double-slit experiment demonstrated that particles exist in a superposition of probabilities until they are observed. Consciousness literally collapses potential into reality. Bell's theorem proved non-locality. Entangled particles respond instantaneously regardless of distance, violating the speed of light, proving that space as we perceive it is an illusion. Physicist David Bohm developed the theory of hollow movement, where all of reality emerges from an implicate order, a field of infinite potential that unfolds into the explicate order that we experience as the physical world. Neville Goddard emerged in this context as a unique bridge between ancient esoteric knowledge and modern understanding. A student of Abdullah, an Ethiopian rabbi who mastered the Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism, Goddard distilled millennia of occult wisdom into practical, applicable principles. He distinguished two levels of understanding, the law and the promise. The law teaches that imagining with feeling creates reality. You assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and the physical world reorganizes itself to confirm it. Thousands have documented results using this technique. Marriages saved after mentally assuming restored love. Fortunes manifested after imaginatively living in abundance, and inexplicable healings after assuming perfect health. But Goddard emphasized that the law was only preparation for something greater, the promise. The promise is the spontaneous awakening to your true identity as the creative consciousness itself. It's not you using techniques to manifest desires, but the direct realization that you are the sole creator of all your experience, that each person in your life is literally you projected. Goddard described his own experience of the promise, a literal explosion in his head followed by the perception of being everyone and everything simultaneously. Not hallucination or psychosis, a permanent expansion of consciousness that completely transformed his understanding of reality. The Western educational system, modeled on the 19th century Prussian system, was specifically designed to create obedient workers, not independent thinkers. John D. Rockefeller, founder of the General Education Board, explicitly declared, "I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers." The curriculum emphasizes memorization over comprehension, conformity over creativity, and competition over collaboration. Newtonian physics is taught as absolute truth, while quantum physics is relegated to advanced specialization. Behaviorist psychology reduces humans to stimulus-response machines, completely ignoring consciousness as a causal factor. This systematic programming created generations that accept limitation as reality, that see separation where unity exists, and that seek externally what can only be found internally. The conditioning is reinforced by the media, by culture, and by social pressure. Questioning the nature of reality is ridiculed as magical thinking. Mystical experiences are pathologized as dissociation. Spontaneous manifestations are dismissed as a coincidence. The result is a population that operates at a minimal fraction of its consciousness potential, actively defending its own limitations as rationality. The statement that each person in your reality is yourself, projected, completely disarms conventional psychology and the common understanding of human relationships. This is not about philosophical solipsism or the denial of the existence of other consciousnesses. It's the recognition of a specific mechanism through which consciousness structures experience. You never interact with others directly, but only with your own assumptions about them materialized in the three-dimensional field. The colleague who constantly sabotages your projects exists in that specific form in your reality because some part of you maintains the assumption of sabotage. The distant and cold partner manifests exactly the emotional frequency that you assume, consciously or unconsciously, about intimacy and love. Abdullah, Neville Goddard's mentor, demonstrated this in a brutal and effective way. When Goddard complained about someone, Abdullah would respond, "You are talking about yourself." This wasn't psychological advice about projection in the Freudian sense. It was a literal description of how reality operates. Each characteristic you perceive in another, each behavior you experience from them, each word you hear them say, all of this emerges from your own crystallized assumptions. Change the assumption internally. Maintain it with emotional conviction, and the external person will change their behavior without any physical action from you. Thousands have tested and confirmed. The tyrannical boss becomes supportive when you assume their benevolent nature. The rebellious child becomes cooperative when you see them internally that way. The difficult client closes the deal when you assume their readiness. The multidimensional structure of reality allows this through a principle that physics is beginning to glimpse. All possibilities exist simultaneously in quantum superposition. Each person you meet exists in infinite potential versions, cruel and kind, generous and stingy, loving and indifferent. Your consciousness, through the mechanism of observation that quantum mechanics confirms, collapses a specific version into your experience. It's not that you create the person from nothing, but you select which dimensional version of them manifests in your perceptual field. This is why the same person can be experienced as completely different by different observers. Each one is collapsing a different version based on their unique assumptions. Dimensions are not distant places that can be reached through spatial travel. They are frequencies of consciousness occupying the same point in space-time. Imagine a radio. All stations exist simultaneously in the same space, but you tune into only one frequency at a time. The third dimension is the frequency of separation, linear cause and effect, and sequential time. The fourth introduces the perception that time is malleable, that past and future are mental constructions accessible in the now. The fifth dimension, where humanity is transitioning, is the frequency where you directly perceive that separation is an illusion, that all others are aspects of yourself experiencing themselves as apparently separate. Carl Jung approached this understanding with his concept of the collective unconscious, but stopped before the radical conclusion. We don't share a collective unconscious. We are the same being experiencing itself through multiple perspectives simultaneously. This is why synchronicities occur. When you change internally, your entire reality must reorganize itself to reflect that change, creating coincidences that are actually dimensional realignments. The person you needed to meet appears. The book with the answer falls from the shelf. The phone call comes at the exact moment. It's not the universe conspiring in your favor. It's yourself in higher dimensions, orchestrating experiences in lower dimensions. The process works through what Goddard called assumption. You assume that something is true and persist in that assumption until the external world confirms it. However, there's a crucial subtlety that most overlook. The assumption must be felt as a present fact, not a future hope. The difference is dimensional. Hope operates in the third dimension, where temporal separation exists between now and later. Assumption operates in the fifth dimension, where everything exists now, and you simply select which now to experience. When you truly understand that the difficult person is yourself, having forgotten your divine nature, projected to create contrast and catalyze growth, the conflict dissolves instantly. This understanding explains why conventional behavioral change techniques consistently fail. Cognitive therapy attempts to change thoughts in the third dimension. In contrast, the real cause operates in the fifth. Medication attempts to alter brain chemistry when the issue is related to the frequency of consciousness. Confrontation attempts to change the other when, in reality, it is just a reflection of yourself. It's like trying to clean a mirror by scrubbing the reflection instead of cleaning your own face. The only real change occurs when you alter your fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality and your role as the sole creator of your experience. The mechanism through which emotions create physical reality operates at a level that completely transcends conventional psychological understanding. When Neville Goddard declared "feeling is the secret," he wasn't offering a motivational platitude. He was revealing the specific technical process through which consciousness imprints patterns onto the malleable quantum field. The discrepancy between what you consciously think you desire and what you viscerally feel as truth always results in the manifestation of the feeling, never the thought. You can affirm prosperity 1,000 times daily, but if the deep feeling is scarcity, scarcity will continue materializing with mathematical precision. Sustained feeling is the invisible mold in which energy condenses into form. This understanding reveals why people who apparently do everything right, visualize, affirm, and act, remain stuck in the same patterns. They're operating at the mental level while creation occurs at the level of feeling assumed as fact. The difference is dimensional. Thought operates at the frequency of possibility. Feeling operates at the frequency of certainty. When you feel something as absolutely real and present, not future hope, but accomplished fact now, the quantum field has no choice but to reorganize itself to confirm that feeling. This is why moments of absolute certainty produce instant manifestations that defy logical explanation. Time in expanded states of consciousness doesn't flow linearly from past to future through the present. All possibilities exist simultaneously in the eternal now, and feeling selects which timeline you experience. Manifestations that should take years according to three-dimensional logic occur in days or hours when you operate from the fifth dimension. The perfect job that didn't exist yesterday appears today because you changed timelines by changing your dominant emotional state. The ideal house that wasn't for sale becomes available at the exact moment you feel it as already yours. The impossible relationship manifests through circumstances that no physical action could have orchestrated. Thomas Troward, Goddard's philosophical predecessor in the New Thought movement, explained that the universal mental substance responds to the impression of thought feeling as wax responds to a seal. But the seal must be held firmly until the impression is complete. Most remove the seal prematurely. They feel the wish fulfilled for moments, then return to doubt, creating distorted and incomplete impressions in physical reality. Mastery comes from maintaining the feeling, regardless of contrary appearances, knowing that the physical world is always a delayed effect of mental-emotional causes already established. Relationships reveal this principle with brutal clarity. The partner you experience is not an independent being acting autonomously. It's the exact materialization of your emotional assumptions about them. When women report that distant husbands suddenly became affectionate after they changed their internal assumptions, it's not psychological manipulation or coincidence. It's a literal demonstration of how everyone in your reality is aspects of yourself responding to your emotional commands. The unreliable friend who always disappoints will continue that pattern as long as you maintain the feeling of their unreliability. Genuinely change your assumption, feel them as absolutely reliable, and observe the inevitable transformation. Joseph Murphy, Goddard's contemporary, documented thousands of cases where changes in internal assumptions produced external changes that violated all probability. Failed businesses became prosperous when owners assumed the feeling of inevitable success. Terminal diagnoses reversed when patients refused to accept the medical verdict and maintained the feeling of perfect health. But Murphy emphasized, it's not desire or hope that creates. It's the deep emotional acceptance that it's already done. Effective prayer doesn't ask. It gives thanks for what has already been received in the realm of feeling. The process of dimensional expansion follows recognizable patterns that everyone who awakens experiences similarly. First comes the rupture of consensus reality. Some impossible event occurs, some synchronicity too extreme to ignore, some manifestation that cannot be explained by conventional logic. The ego panics, trying to reconstruct the previous worldview, creating elaborate rationalizations. Physical symptoms manifest, pressure in the head, ringing in the ears, and electrical sensations coursing through the body. It's not pathology, it's the nervous system recalibrating to process subtler frequencies of information. The resistance phase can last years. The ego creates drama, chaos, and distraction, anything to avoid the final surrender to the truth that you are the sole creator of your experience. Relationships implode when people operate at incompatible frequencies. Careers built on false foundations crumble. Carefully cultivated identities dissolve. It's the death of the false self that believed it was a victim of circumstances. Only when resistance ceases, when you completely accept your creative responsibility, does stabilization and expanded consciousness become possible. In the new frequency, what previously provoked automatic emotional reaction is now perceived as neutral feedback about internal states. The irritated boss is no longer a source of stress. It's a mirror showing unresolved internal irritation. The distant partner is no longer a cause of suffering. It's a reflection of self-imposed emotional distance. Each experience becomes an opportunity for refinement. Each challenge an invitation for additional expansion. The control center moves permanently from the external to the internal, and life transforms from reaction into conscious creation. The human body was not designed to support expanded dimensional frequencies without undergoing profound adaptations. When consciousness begins to operate consistently in the fifth dimension, the nervous system initiates reconfigurations that conventional medicine cannot categorize. Sensations of electrical current running through the spine arise, especially during meditative states or moments of deep insight. The pineal gland, calcified in much of the adult population by fluoride and limiting mental programming, begins a process of decalcification, producing intense pressure in the center of the head, geometric visions with closed eyes, and perception of light in completely dark environments. These are not hallucinations. They are organs of subtle perception reactivating after generations of dormancy. Sensitivity to energy fields becomes inescapable. You enter an environment and immediately feel the dominant emotional quality, regardless of superficial appearances. The meeting where everyone smiles, but hostility permeates every interaction. The relationship where words of love are spoken, but the energy field screams disconnection. Conversations become multidimensional experiences. You hear the words, but also perceive the unexpressed intentions, the hidden fears, and the denied truths. This expanded perception cannot be turned off once activated. It's the price and the gift of a higher dimensional consciousness. Existing relationships begin radical realignment when you viscerally understand that each person in your life is a manifestation of your own internal states. The rebellious child who defied every attempt at communication suddenly becomes receptive when you stop projecting onto them your own repressed rebellion. The critical father who never approved of anything transforms into a supporter when you cease seeking externally the validation that can only come from within. But there's a dark side. Relationships based on frequencies incompatible with your new consciousness simply dissolve, often abruptly, without logical explanation. The person disappears from your life as if they never existed, because in the dimensional frequency where you now operate, they really no longer exist. The digestive process becomes a precise barometer of dimensional alignment. Foods you consumed for decades without problem now cause immediate reaction if their vibrational frequency is incompatible with your new state. Meat produces lethargy and mental density. Refined sugar creates disproportionate emotional turbulence. Alcohol, even in small quantities, temporarily collapses your frequency, making you experience lower dimensional realities with all their limitations and sufferings. The body isn't punishing, it's communicating precisely what supports or sabotages your expanded consciousness. Sleep patterns transform completely. Some nights you wake precisely at 3:33 or 4:44, not by chance, but because at these moments the veil between dimensions is thinnest and downloads of higher dimensional information occur. Other nights, sleep is so deep that you wake with no memory of having slept, as if you had simply blinked between lying down and rising. Dreams become vivid beyond description, often prophetic, showing events that manifest days or weeks later exactly as dreamed. It's not the development of psychic powers, it's normal operation when consciousness is no longer trapped in the illusion of linear time. Decision-making completely abandons the logical pro-con analysis that characterizes the three-dimensional mind. You instantly feel whether something resonates with your energy field or creates dissonance. Job offers that seem perfect on paper produce physical nausea when incompatible with your frequency. People who everyone considers wonderful generate inexplicable energetic repulsion if they operate in incompatible consciousness. Conversely, opportunities that seem illogical, people who seem inadequate, and paths that seem impossible generate unmistakable energetic expansion when aligned with your dimensional trajectory. Following these energetic impulses, ignoring all conventional logic, leads to synchronicities and manifestations that repeatedly confirm the wisdom of dimensional discernment. The development of observer consciousness marks the point of no return in dimensional expansion. Space arises between you and your thoughts, between you and your emotions, between you and your experiences. You observe anger arise without becoming angry. You observe fear appear without becoming afraid. You observe drama unfold without being sucked into it. This observational space is the fifth dimension, the point of pure consciousness, from where you can deliberately choose which reality to experience, which emotion to cultivate, which timeline to follow. It's not pathological dissociation, it's conscious mastery over the mechanisms of creation. But there is a price. The initial isolation is brutal. You can no longer participate in conversations about victimization, limitation, and impossibility. Social gatherings become exercises in containment while others discuss problems that you know to be self-imposed. Family questions your sanity when you affirm that reality is malleable. Friends drift away when you refuse to validate their stories of suffering. You inhabit two worlds simultaneously, the three-dimensional world where you must function physically and the five-dimensional world where you operate consciously. Navigation between them requires mastery that takes years to develop. Stabilization in expanded consciousness is not a single event, but a continuous process of refinement. Each layer of dissolved programming reveals another deeper one. Each transcended limitation exposes another more subtle one. The ego continually tries to reassert control through increasingly sophisticated dramas. Constant vigilance becomes necessary to maintain elevated frequency in a world designed to collapse consciousness back into three-dimensional density. But with each day of practice, each conscious choice, each refusal to accept limitation as reality, the new frequency becomes more stable, more natural, more inevitably your true nature. The complete architecture of reality revealed here is not philosophical theory or metaphorical construction. It's the operational map of how consciousness creates experience, deliberately hidden while humanity was kept in lower dimensional frequencies. From the Hermetic knowledge protected in secret societies to Goddard's distinction between law and promise, from the projective nature of all beings in your reality to the physiological changes of dimensional expansion, each element forms part of a unique and coherent system that explains not just anomalous experiences, but the very structure of existence. You have always operated on these principles unconsciously. The difference now is the opportunity to operate them consciously. Humanity's present moment has no precedent in known history. The exponential acceleration of global events, economic collapses, exposure of systemic manipulations, dissolution of official narratives, and mass questioning of previously unquestionable authorities is not random chaos. It's a symptom of collective dimensional expansion, where three-dimensional structures based on separation and control can no longer maintain cohesion in increasingly five-dimensional frequencies. Each revelation of corruption, each exposure of historical lies, each breakdown of established systems accelerates the collective awakening to the truth that reality has always been a conscious construction, not an immutable objective fact. Those who understand these principles navigate the apparent chaos with serenity, impossible for those operating in three-dimensional consciousness. While others panic about external collapses, you recognize the opportunity. I hope you liked the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. On the road to 500,000 subscribers. Please join us for the journey.